to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the final story in the first series of the Sarah Jane Adventures, The Lost Boy, written by Phil Ford and directed by Charles Martin. This obviously concludes the first series of Sarah Jane Adventures. It continues on from the fact that Alan Jackson, the father of Maria Jackson, now knows about the aliens and what they are up to, and also deals with some really hard-hitting drama for the Sarah Jane Adventures. Now, season 1 was a complete hit, and this all culminated in The Lost Boy being one of the most well-viewed channels on the CBeebies channel. So, pretty cool stuff. This is the official box set that I've got it from, but because it was the first, in fact it's the only story on the discs, which makes it much easier for me, I've printed out my own DVD cover. I want to show you, I'll put my hand over it. Oops, sorry. That's the front. I put my hand over it because it contains a spoiler. Here's the spine, if anyone is interested. I'll be careful here. And here's the back. So there you go. So, yeah, pretty exciting stuff. We're getting into the final episode of the first series of Sarah Jane before we tackle, the big Doctor Who stuff, which we're always really looking forward to. And a part of me did kind of just want to get this over and done with so we can get to know those stories. And for everybody who's been keeping up the track, probably know what I'm on about. But this is also a very well handled and very well detailed story for the most part. And it deals with a lot of, not adult, but mature subject matter, which is surprising for a kids show like this. Usually it's all about just keeping the kids entertained. You don't delve into a much more serious, you don't bring the cops in and have your main character arrested at one point. But that's what this episode does, and whether it's good or bad, I do highly appreciate Phil Ford and Russell T Davies pushing the story, pushing the adventures of Sarah Jane into this way, into this area. As for its popularity, from what I can gather, it's a bit of a hit and miss. A lot of people like it, a lot of people hate it, and most people are just kind of like in the middle thinking, meh, it's alright. But I feel like the main reason it has that reputation is because it came right after whatever happened to Sarah Jane. Probably one of the best written episodes of the series, or at least in the first series, easily by far the best. And then you go to this story, which though still deals with a lot more serious subject matter for a kids show. I mean, if this was Doctor Who, we wouldn't really think much of it. But the fact that it is on a BBC channel program, then that makes it a little bit more noteworthy, in my opinion. So we have that. Now, of course, as I've stated, it continues on from the last story with Alan basically being explained by Maria what has been going on. Now, this story has a lot of previous years, like a lot of flashbacks. So a lot of the majority of the story, at least I say majority, there's a handful of scenes in which characters are recollecting events from previous episodes, and we have flashbacks to them. Most of them are important for the narrative, and some of them are just some fun nods, like how Maria mentions how Alan was once turned to stone by the Gorgon, a reference to Eye of the Gorgon, which was the third story in the series overall, because Invasion of the Bane doesn't technically count as series 1, even though it's on the box set. So there's that. And so we have the pre-credit sequence, which is basically just Alan basically explaining to Alan, her father, what Sarah Jane does, what's going on, and yes, it's pretty dangerous, but it's a lot of fun at the same time. So yeah, there's dangers out there in the universe, but there's also a lot to love, and there's also a lot of fun to be had. But Alan is really concerned by this, knowing that Sarah Jane has been putting not only these kids, but his daughter in danger. He decides to sell a house, and Maria starts panicking and tries to reason with Sarah Jane and her father, and Alan kind of sees how torn up Maria is about all this. So he later decides, okay, I'm not going to sell the house. We are now a team in this. I'm now basically part of the Sarah Jane crew, and I really like his interaction into the story. The fact that we now have two adult characters means that the story does feel more confident in pushing it forward. I know that Maria and Alan don't stay along after this series. In fact, I believe in the next story, it's their leaving story in terms of the Sarah Jane adventures. So I don't know how this gets resolved because I haven't seen those stories yet, but I really do wish that we get more adult characters in the Sarah Jane adventures, keeping the adult sensibilities in our stories a little bit more spread out, as usually it's Sarah Jane that's the one that's got to be the straight face, the one who has basically all the answers or has a much more mature outlet, whilst all the kids are like rebels and reckless and all that. So I really like Alan's part to play in this, and I like how he does get Maria to kind of push him into things he doesn't want to do, like break into someone's house at one point. And it seems like for the first half of the episode, things are going all right. Alan basically is part of the team now, and there is no such drama. Sarah Jane is talking to Luke in her house, and she's got the news on, BBC News on, where this family are talking about their lost son and how they need him back, they want him back. And back in Maria's house, Maria and Alan are also watching this exact programme. And I love how, like, throughout this story so far, it's been really nice, really calm and collective. There was a bit of tension with Alan deciding, it's like, right, this isn't safe. Kids, we can't put you in so much danger, and then he kind of gets reasoned out of it. And then, in a split second, the dramatic tension comes flooding in, as on this screen, on the BBC News, very serious as well, like, lost children, that is a very serious, dark topic, the idea of children going missing and parents are using their news, these outlets. I mean, this story came out only a few years after the Madeleine McCann incident, which is which this kind of parallels, and it's really eerie to see such a seriously dark part of real life events being mimicked in the Sarah Jane adventures. Though I do like, it's a much more kid-friendly approach. But my God, like, what the hell? But anyway, it turns out, and this is the shocker, this is the surprise, this is the main event of the series, of the last episode, is that the lost boy, the parents claim, looks exactly, if not identical, to Luke. And Sarah Jane, and everybody's shocked. I love how, like, Maria just drops the plate down, and Sarah Jane she gets Mr. Smith to basically scan Luke. It's like, is this true? Is this a possibility? I thought he was cloned by multiple people to be created, like by the Bane. I didn't realize he was stolen, and he was an actual person that had his memories wiped. She didn't think it was a possibility, but she knew it could happen. And so Maria's mother, who is very, her character, she basically calls the cops on Sarah Jane, and I love it just goes really, really serious, and we'll talk about that after I explain what happens in the scene. Essentially, the police come out to Sarah Jane's house, and Sarah Jane it's like, can I have a moment with him? And she tries to comfort Luke. It's like, this isn't a sad thing. We will now be reunited with your real parents, your biological parents. Sure, you can't remember them, but they are your family, and they need to know for you and care for you, and they love you and they appreciate you and they need you in their lives. You're not my real son, after all. And so she comforts Luke into meeting his real family in the context of the story, and the parents, they hug him, they start crying in tears, and then they're like, you have no memory of us, and they kind of attack Sarah Jane. It's like, what have you done to my son? And Sarah Jane is like, I did know, honest to God. He had lost his memory, and I just kind of took him under my wing. And the parents are like, how dare you? You just thought he just came out of the trees or something. And the police witnessing all this are like, right, I think this should be taken back to back at the office. Don't you think, Sarah Jane? And they arrest her for stealing a child. That's pretty messed up. And so they drive off. So I want to specifically point down to this scene overall, because in terms of part one, it's basically a great summary of my feelings throughout the story. When it comes to how the story is told, the way it's written, the way the actors play it, it is perfect, at least for the part one, where we have this very serious, very dramatic, very tense situation, which really, like, if anybody was sane in BBC, wouldn't let this story be developed on a CBBC channel. Like, that is just completely mental. And like I said, it kind of parallels real world events, like with Madeleine McCann and that Shannon girl, I couldn't remember her last name, but there was like 2 incidents of children have gone missing, although that's kind of different here because they state the kids have ran away. I don't know how that difference is from the story, but essentially in this narrative, Sarah Jane is considered the kidnapper. But as you could probably sense that I'm building up to something, and that is Charles Martin's directing. It's not bad. He has previously written for Warriors of the, what's the story called? Warriors of the Cudlag, a story which was heavily panned for its directing and its writing style, and rightfully so in my opinion. And here, with a much better script under his wing that he can work off, his directing style is sort of okay, and I feel like Charles Martin is not only a hindrance onto the story, but it's also why the story was allowed to be made, because he does let the story play out with its dark themes, and he does allow for these slower moments, and there are some great moments of tensity. However, for the majority of the story, in these tense moments, things are just too brightly lit, too squeaky clean, too presentable, if that makes any sense. The story looks too nice, and for the majority, for most stories, that wouldn't be a problem. In fact, that would have been a great tool to be used in his previous story, for the story to look too clean, too squeaky clean, too nice. But here, it takes away from the realism from the story, in my opinion, and scenes where, like, Sarah Jane being arrested after being accused of stealing a child, and the horrifying realization that Sarah Jane didn't even look to see if this child was even kidnapped. She just thought, well, this is a kid now, and I guess I can adopt him now. And there's a great scene later on, probably one of my favourite scenes, where Maria is just like, have you heard the news? And she's like, well, of course she's seen the news, but like Maria's like, how are you? It's okay? And Sarah Jane's just like, yes, it's okay. It's actually better now. Luke's now with his real family, and I have no kids to stop me. Kids that are distracted. Your father was right, Maria. My life is dangerous. For the moment, it's been nice and fun, but that's just been pure luck. How long will that last? And that would be a great poignant scene in any franchise, but I think it really hits home for Sarah Jane because it exists within the same universe as Doctor Who, and by extension, Torchwood. For those of you who've been watching this as a marathon, you know that in the last episode that I've done was the final episode in Series 2 of Torchwood Exit Wounds, where we had 2 characters die, and this was a great story to actually watch after that, because the realizations of this, people do die, people do get hurt, endangered, and Sarah Jane kind of is like realizing that, and is realizing that the reason that she's had so much fun recently is just mainly out of pure luck that nobody under her wing has been killed or slaughtered yet. But again, the directing of it is a bit too nice, it's a bit too clean, and it does take away from the tension because it feels like you're watching a CBeebies program when I think the scene really calls for a much more grittier, a much more realistic look. Maybe, you know, Sarah Jane's hair's all messed up because she hasn't been sleeping for a while, or her clothes are a little bit scruffy because she hasn't really thought about her appearance or something, you know, something like that. But no, it still has a very, very professional, almost too professional look about it, if that makes that much of a sense. So Sarah Jane gets a mission from Mr. Smith, as he basically explains that there's this organisation, the Pharos Institute, which I don't know if that's a reference to the Pharos Project from Legoplish. Sarah Janes mentions that this is a company that has been running for 20 years. I don't know when Legoplish is supposed to be taking place, probably in around 1980, so I don't know if I don't think the timelines really match up there, but Pharos. So there's that, and so Sarah Jane gets on a mission to that, whilst Maria and Clyde basically try and storm out and try and figure out what's going on, because they don't believe that these parents are really Luke, and Luke kind of gets this impression too, as we later learn that they have some sort of interior motive, as they seem to be working for a sinister, malevolent evil, and the parents start giggling at all of this, of basically capturing Luke and locking him in his bedroom. And there's a great scene in which Clive, which is probably one of the few great directed moments in this story, in which Clive comes knocking on Ashley, the claimed, that's what they claim is Luke's real name is. He knocks on Ashley's door, and the parents just like, you cannot see him, he's our child, this is a photo of us on his birthday, and he takes that away with him. And there's a great shot in which Clive's like walking off, and Luke is just smashing on the window. It's like, Clive, don't go, it's me, I'm up here, I'm not safe, I'm kidnapped here. But Clive cannot see it, and the music starts tensing up, almost like a horror scene. I love that little moment. It's very well handled, both directed and written. And then there's the twist. This story has multiple twists. Sarah Jane goes to the Pharos Institute, finds out that they've been working with this alien technology, although they don't claim they own alien technology, but they believe that it's been run by a child who has an IQ of like 1 billion and trillion, who seems to be very stuck up. And he also, later on, turns out to be part of this family that Luke is being kidnapped by. And Luke tries to break out. But the family kind of like hold him out, and it's like, don't you remember me? Don't you remember what you did to us? Whilst Clyde tries to take the photo back to Sarah Jane, but Sarah Jane leaves before he can get. And so Clyde goes up to the basement, and we have our two twists of the narrative. So here's a massive spoiler warning, because these twists are pretty big for the narrative and completely change not only the story, but the series as a whole in terms of what we've known so far. Well, I say the twist. I mean, one twist does that. But the first twist with the family, it turns out it's the family of Slitheen, specifically the child, the one who is working on the Pharos Institute project, was actually the kid that had survived in Revenge of the Slitheen. Because he got teleported away just before his parents were brutally murdered in front of the Sarah Jane's crew. So he's basically trying to get his revenge on Sarah Jane, but it turns out they have been working for a malevolent evil, this creature who saved the Slitheen and is basically like, right, I can help you get your revenge for them killing your father, but in return you've got to help me with this project in this institute. And it turns out this malevolent evil, this creature, turns out to be none other than Mr. Smith, Sarah Jane's trustworthy computer. Poof, and he captures Clive and puts him into his matrix systems, this like computer void, where he is locked in throughout episode 2. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I love the twist of the Slitheen, and I love how they're interacting in this story. Sure, they're a very silly idea and a silly concept, and they do kind of take away from the much really serious elements of the first half. Like, it does completely feel like the first half and the second half are completely different stories by this point, because now it's gone from a very serious drama about Sarah Jane losing her son to it's the Slitheen over after all. But the seriousness still kind of continue as Sarah Jane's most trustworthy, because this is the person who arguably is the person she trusts the most, the one who she's been with the most throughout the series. Mr. Smith turns out to be the villain, the corporate bad guy of the story. And I love Alex Armstrong's portrayal of an evil Mr. Smith here. He's just having so much of a blast, so much fun, and the actor who plays him is just phenomenal. There's some really phenomenal... Oh, I just broke the box. Oh, no! Oh, that's put me in a foul mood now. So anyway, Maria takes her father to come and look into the house and into Alex's house, where they learn that it's Slitheen. And I love the scene in which Alan, he opens the door and he finds the skin of the Slitheen, and the first thing he thinks of is that the family are actually cannibals, and Maria is kind of happy by the fact that it turns out it's Slitheen, because A, they easily defeated them, and B, it means that Luke isn't their son, and that Luke can belong to Sarah Jane once more. In terms of continuity, I don't know what is the ramifications of this to the outside world. I mean, when Sarah Jane goes to investigate the Pharos Institute, nobody brings up the fact that this woman has recently been in the news for kidnapping a child. Like, that's pretty serious stuff right there. Like, oh look, it's Sarah Jane, the famous journalist. Didn't you kidnap a child recently? Shouldn't that ruin your reputation? But that doesn't really play into any part of the narrative here. So Mr. Smith is basically using the Slitheen's to push forward this machine which will heighten the humans' psychic kinetic abilities, which lay dormant in everybody, which, by the way, I'd like to add is a reference to Planet of the Spiders, which was mentioned that like all humans have this capacity for telekinetic energies, but only a handful of people can actually tap into those forces. And they've created a device which will allow humans to unlock this potential. And the Slitheen originally planned to betray Mr. Smith and to capture Luke and basically put him to the machine so that they can harness its energy, harness its ability, and sell Luke's kinetic energy out for profit, because they are Slitheen. Their main goal as a family is profiteering. I love Maria's description of them to her father, that they are basically only fools and horses, but with green skin and giant claws. Brilliant. That is some brilliant dialogue right there. And I like how the resolution of that is basically Sarah Jane basically does talk to the Slitheen, and I like how the younger one is like, I don't care, I'm just going to kill you so I can get revenge for my family, you killed my family. But the other Slitheen basically like stop him, and they're just like, we're here to listen, what do you mean it'll kill us all? So that part kind of gets resolved pretty quickly, and the Slitheen are kind of the henchmen of the story, but they do get a very prominent role in the adventure that you do feel comfortable in saying this is a Slitheen adventure. And Luke, before Sarah Jane bumps into them, they try to harness the energy of Luke using this machine. However, Luke, because he's a genius created by the Bane using so he's basically like born to have the perfect brain, he can actually use that machine without it draining his energy, and so he uses his psychokinetic powers almost like the Force to free himself and throw a Slitheen to the other side of the room. So that's a really cool scene. And because he's scared, he's panicking and he doesn't know what to do, the first thing he does is run to Sarah Jane, while Sarah Jane arrives at the Ferris Institute. Clive, I forgot to mention, Clive has the ability in Mr. Smith's Matrix that he can communicate through computers. He warns Alan that Mr. Smith has turned evil, and Mr. Smith basically reveals himself to them. And like I said, Armstrong does a fantastic job here at playing this evil, sinister computer, and it really is like memorizing to hear this voice and this editing of a simple computer screen with this weird imagery, which it's like it's a loading screen, it's screensaver, and somehow it just comes off really sinister here. So I really like that. But Sarah Jane tries to get Alan, because he's good with computers. He basically uploads Sarah Jane a virus. Now he claims that this virus is a military grade virus, and when Sarah Jane asks him how did he get this information, he claims that you're not the only one with people high in higher places. Does that get resolved in another story? We'll just have to wait and see, but that is a very strange and interesting detail, and I do hope that they bring that up again. But who knows, maybe it's completely forgotten after the end of this series, who knows? And so Luke gets captured by Mr. Smith, who forces him to wear this device so that Clive could be saved, and he uses this device to basically bring the moon crashing down to the planet. I also like how for the majority of the episode where in the flashbacks we get clips that we've already seen. However, when Sarah Jane explains who Mr. Smith is and that he's actually an alien crystal that can communicate with computers, and it's sort of like it has this like interface, and she created Mr. Smith using this alien crystal intelligence. That is actually new clips for this episode, and because it's all been like mixed together in a story which uses flashbacks regularly, it doesn't feel out of place and actually flows really well with the narrative. So we get then to basically the final climax as Sarah Jane is trying to dodge bullets, as Luke, with this kinetic energy thing on his head, is having the moon crashing down to the earth, and Mr. Smith basically reveals that his plan is that his species, this species of sentient crystals, live dormant beneath the earth, and he plans to crash the moon onto the planet so that it will destroy Earth and free in his people. And Sarah Jane trips him and basically distracts him before she can open the vault, and we get our first appearance since, I think it was Invasion of the Bane, where we get K9 having a very prominent scene in which he comes in and he starts firing and shooting out at Mr. Smith as Sarah Jane starts dodging him using K9 as a decoy and uploading this virus, deleting Mr. Smith's memories and replacing it with a completely new memory source of information, and Mr. Smith resets everything and everyone is all fine, safe and dandy, and the episode ends with a monologue by Sarah Jane and basically explaining that the universe is dangerous, it's deadly out there, but a lot of times it's fun and the people, and I wouldn't have it basically any other way. And she gets reunited with Luke and everybody's having a nice dandy time. So that's The Lost Boys. Overall, I think for the most part it's a very good story. However, I feel like there are some hindrances to the story which stops it from being a great adventure. From its directing to the fact that, some details seem a bit too important, like with this whole thing going on, is now Sarah Jane a known kidnapper? Like, what is her reputation now compared to the rest of the world? Surely Unit who would cover it up in some way, shape or form, but like, what, how do you, it was all over the news, even if, say, she wasn't ever present on the news, Luke is still a known kid now, so that's pretty, strange. And the fact we have two plots, I take that back, I actually really like that in this adventure. But like I said, the majority of it is very good, very well handled. I like the seriousness of part one and how the dramatic tensions all build up. Bring some really heart-cutting scenes especially with Sarah Jane, Maria, and Luke. And I like how Alan kind of becomes a bigger part in this story. I wish Clyde had a little bit more to do. He was kind of sidelined for the most part in this adventure. And I do actually like the two competing villains, because for the most part it seems like there's these two separate plot lines for the most part, with Sarah Jane and the Ferris Project and then the kids and the Slovene. Then it's connected and they kind of break out again when we have Mr. Smith turning out to be this evil overlord, and then you got the Slovene, and they kind of have like their own separate plot lines, and then they kind of converge again at the end. And so it's pretty well executed for the most part, but I feel like I can understand why this isn't so many people's favourites. It's hindered on so many levels, but it's still a pretty good and engaging adventure. It's just a shame it came after one of the best episodes, best stories of the series, as far as I'm concerned, because I haven't watched most of the rest of the Sarah Jane as of me recording this video. So anyway, that's The Lost Boy. So join me next time where Donna Noble, an event in her life which led her into meeting the Doctor and saving all of these planets and all of these moments, gets rewritten out of history, and we witness this alternate universe where Donna never met the Doctor. There's only one person who knows the truth, one person who must convince Donna that she is the most perfect person for the role, and that she knows the Doctor and she is this magnificent individual. She is not just this normal person, she is fantastic. And that person is Rose Tyler. So join me next time for Turn Left, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!